So in high school, I did a complete 180. This 180, though, wasn't sudden by any stretch. It was more of a escalating thing that just happened over time. In elementary, I was definitely what you would call a good Samaritan. And in middle school is where I kind of tiptoed the line a little bit. And once I walked into the last 4 years of my sentence, I honestly kind of just said, fuck it. The story kind of starts. I was at my boy Gary's house, chilling with him and James, and now those obviously aren't their real names. Who the fuck is named Gary in the year 2024? But stay with me now. It was like fucking December, and I remember there was a The Bronx fight on. And if you know anything about the UFC and live in the glorious United States, you know that shit lasts until like God 30 at fucking night. It's not even cool. And we had to go to this bonfire. Why would anybody have a bonfire in December? Good question. I don't know. But we were all carless bums. And so luckily Gary's mom was a complete G and she offered to take us there. Earlier that night when I pulled up, it was not that cold out, so I just came equipped with the basics. I came with that jean t-shirt combo rolling like Hank Hill. Gary's mom was like, "Hey, take this jacket." And at first I was like, no, I'm good, I don't need the jacket. One thing about Gary's mom is that she was actually kind of crazy. So that's a story for its own time. That crazy appeared in her eyes the first time I said, no, I'm okay. And so then when she asked me if I wanted the jacket a second time, I made sure to take it lickety split. So by the time we pulled up to the function, shit was already popping off. It had been going on for a couple of hours at this point, and so for what booze was left, people were very willing to share it because, as you know, drunker or more under the influence you become, more loving you become, at least in most people's cases. So being the level 3 alcoholic I was, that shit hit me like a train. So there were only a few events I remember, and one of them is turning into prime RVD and jumping through a plastic folding table. And like the dumbass I was, I landed on my back, which maybe that wasn't the dumbass idea. I really don't remember it all that well. But what I do remember is the bruise I had on my back for 2 months. I don't know if I wasn't eating enough pineapple or something back then, but I must have got some good airtime to leave a bruise the way it did. I wish I had a photo. I remember some other Debbie dipshit brought a bunch of milk crates because at that time the milk crate challenge was popping off and people were scaling those motherfuckers like the Great Pyramids. But luckily for myself and everybody involved, nobody was of sober mind enough to actually build one of these milk crate pyramids. And honestly, the last thing I vividly remember about that night was that there was some grown ass 20 something year old hanging out. Because, you know, every high school party has that guy who peaked in high school and just can't let go of it. But, you know, he was hammered like everyone else. But the difference was he was challenging everybody to some good old Greco Roman. And given that I had watched the UFC event prior to coming, I felt the spirit of Charles Do Bronx flowing through my veins. And at this point in my life, I had never trained before, and I was also drunk and a child compared to this grown pig farmer, so I was dispatched of pretty quickly. After a couple more hours of drunken foolery, Gary's mom pulled back up to pick us up, and Gary and James were both telling me, hey man, you need to get in the car. And I ended up telling him that the party was still raging and there was no need to leave. And in all fairness to them, they tried to convince me to go. But you can't convince somebody who doesn't want to. So don't go talking shit about them for leaving me there. In hindsight, though, I probably should have gone home because there wasn't much else from that night specifically that happened. I did introduce myself to everybody about 3 times over as the guy who jumped through the table. But other than that, not a whole lot of action happened. I woke up at like 6 fucking 30 that morning, so I must have only got like 3 or 4 hours of sleep max, probably even less. And that shit felt like a switch to Trevor moment if I've ever had one in real life. I really didn't know what the fuck was happening. But the fire was still going, and once I kinda came to my senses, I noticed this motherfucker laying next to the fire looking like Two-Face. And one of my fellow delinquents ended up informing me that he fell asleep there last night and he just kinda rolled into it. And then once he kinda calmed down from the first to second degree burns on his face, he just went back to sleep. And as I was leaving, I saw some people get that dipping sauce that you would get from the Burger King. I think it was a ranch, if I'm not mistaken, and they were just smearing it on his face. Now, I don't know if that can cause like an infection given that there were burns on his face, but no one seemed to care to be bukkake-ing him with that ranch. But after I left that early morning powwow, I had to start walking. And that shit was 2 miles. And this wasn't hungover, I was still drunk. And it was like fucking December, so it was a little bit cold. I felt like the average pre-E4 soldier in the army doing PT in the morning. Not only was I still drunk, not only was I cold, not only was I sincerely out of shape at that time, and not only was it 2 miles away, I was also paranoid because, fun fact, I had a hard ass for a dad. And if he saw me moseying through the streets at 6:30 in the morning after I told him I was going to have a little sleepover at my friend's house, it would have been raps. But I made it away from this harrowing journey fairly unscathed, and I made it back to the G spot. I did piss off my then girlfriend at the time. It was kind of a combination of being pissed off and worried, but mainly pissed off, which was completely fair given the last thing I had text her was about my one-on-one opportunity to take the strap off of that 24-year-old pig farmer who was just as drunk as me. But she wasn't concerned enough to call the cops, so was she really concerned? I was also pretty sick for the next day, day and a half, given the fact that I had slept outside with nothing but a jacket. That jacket really did come in clutch, though. I do have that shit to this day because she said I could just keep it. Maybe because I came back looking like a filthy fucking animal. However, it was a nice gesture nonetheless. And when Gary's dad got told about what I did, his only response was, "That's hardcore," and that was pretty neat. Anyways, if you got this far, thanks. That's pretty cool. And if you've gotten this far and you haven't clicked that red hot subscribe button, you should. You will. You're going to. Thanks.